that about 300 firms that are fintechs that lend money through mobile phones have been exempted from this. Most of them are not licensed, and so a lot of the people that have been listed at the CRB are people who borrowed from them. And I think the central bank is feeling like there's abuse here because there have been complaints from across the country about the listing that happens haphazardly. And so these 300 firms have been, so to speak, requested not to submit any names to CRB. At the same time, the central bank has said that only amounts less than 1,000 shillings, only amounts more than 1,000 shillings can be listed. In other words, if I borrow 500 shillings and I am unable to pay, I should not be listed with the CRB. 1,000 shillings is roughly $10. And so, yes, that means, therefore, that there's a lot of customers that have defaulted, whose loans need to be, so to speak, forgiven unconditionally and deregistered by CRBs unconditionally moving forward. Currently, we are looking at around, sorry?
You can continue.
Lovely. Currently, we are looking at around 3.2 million Kenyans that have been listed at the CRB. That's a big challenge because we are a population of around 49 million. So that's like, that's almost like, 5% of the population, not working population. The whole population, 5% of it is unable to pay their loans. So I think that's a concern that the central bank took in stride and decided that, no, this cannot continue.
Right, and that number, 3.2 million, actually rose from the 2.7 million last year. What do you think is the reason why?
Well, on one hand, of course, there's a lot of flashiness and people are borrowing for betting. The biggest challenge we have is a lot of Kenyan youth are borrowing to go and bet this money, sports betting, most of it. And usually because of the, the celebrated materialism that has no depth and has no, we do not ask people where they got money from. We just want to celebrate that they have money. And so the youth are thinking that's the life they want to live. And so the only avenue to that is betting. It's a very bad culture that needs to be addressed. On the other hand, also, we are seeing a deteriorating economy since 2007, we have not really picked up after that election. 2017, sorry, we've not picked up after that election. And so you're seeing a lot of struggle from the population. There's a lot of borrowing going on just to survive, see the day through. And this is why you find that large firms like Safaricom are making a lot of money because they lend to these very people using M-Shwari and using Fuliza, the products that they have that you can borrow from the comfort of your phone. And so that's the biggest challenge we have, that there's a lot of materialism, there's betting going on, the economy is deteriorating, and there's no employment for the young people.
Right, all so during the time of this pandemic that has also been contributing so much to that. Sorry to cut you off there, Odhiambo. Just want to get to these next points before we run out of time. There have been quite a few unregulated micro-lenders that have invested in Kenya's credit market, in response to the growth in demand for quick loans. So what does this mean for those people? Doesn't this affect them negatively?
It does. It does. But I think that is expected in an environment where regulation is coming in. There's still no stringent regulation. The policy adopted by CBK a few days back does not translate into a full regulation, and we are still hopeful that will come into play because there's also been a lot of and misuse of the opportunities by some of these investors. And so I would welcome regulation. Of course, some of the regulation have been implemented in a blanket way, like the government holding responsible young people who've borrowed education loans and listing them before they get jobs to pay those loans. And so some of it is undesirable. There are a lot of it is going to help the population to just get things in order. And so, no, I do not discount the fact that the investors are going to struggle. But hey, there are other avenues of investing and other opportunities that are more appealing to the population, more appealing to the law of the land.
That was economic analyst Odhiambo Ramogi. Moving on, in a bid to streamline operations, 11 savings and credit cooperatives have signed an agreement with Access to Finance Rwanda to deploy a banking software that will automate transactions and cut down expenses and losses. For more on how effective this will be, I spoke to Jean Bosco Iyachu, Acting Country Director for Access to Finance Rwanda.
So last week we signed an agreement between Access to Finance Rwanda and the non-Umurenge SACCOs. Those are SACCOs serving low-income people across Rwanda, but which are not part of the Umurenge SACCOs. And another party to this agreement is the Association of Microfinance Institutions that has memberships. And that membership is constituted by MFIs and SACCOs across the country. So we are digitizing their operations, and we are starting with 11 non-Umurenge SACCOs. And these ones, it's a one-year project that will cover and will be serving really close to 50,000 members of those SACCOs. But the platform is open to other SACCOs to join later, those that are still not automated. So we are deploying a core banking system, which is centralized at the National Data Center. And this system will support SACCOs in providing financial services to their members in a more efficient way, using mobile banking and agency banking. It's quite hard for them to set up different bricks and mortar branches across the country for their members' convenience. But with this technology, they will be able to, customers will be able, members will be able to get services wherever they are without really a lot of investment from these SACCOs that are still small in their capacity. The other aspect is capacity building of SACCOs. When you automate, you want also SACCOs to make sure that they have the right procedures, the right policies. We want to look at their governance structures. We want to look at their risk management capabilities, but also credit administration, so to ensure that they are efficient from that standpoint. So we have AMIR, which is the association, to really coordinate this project and ensure that they sustain this intervention beyond Access to Finance Rwanda's support, which is scheduled to take 1 year.
Right. Jean Bosco, what was the financial costs, the ones that are going to be avoided now, of the outdated operations that SACCOs were operating by?
So most SACCOs were still manual. Some of them are manual because they, as I said, are small in nature. They make very limited operating margin, and you find that they can't really acquire a robust core banking system. So they needed really support, and that's why institutions like Access to Finance Rwanda, we are there to support so that they provide the right financial services to the low-income people across Rwanda. The others who had some systems that are really non-optimal, and I think it's very important that they get a very efficient core banking system and have those alternative digital channels that support. And we must say that, I mean, if I give you an example of what happened when we under lockdown during COVID, clearly, I mean, those people, I mean, people like us who have accounts in different banks, commercial banks, we're able to pull money from there through our mobile wallet, mobile banking platforms, and be able to pay through that channel. But imagine SACCOs without such kind of robust system. So people weren't able, it was quite hard for them to get access to their savings and be able to pay for different goods and services they needed at that time.
Right.
So it's very important that this is put in place.
Right. In terms of money and time, what will it take for these SACCOs to be able to move over to the new system, the new digital system?
So I think, as I said, it will take 1 year. So we have started the process, and really by March we should be ending because the process started early in this year, though it had some delays caused by COVID-19 pandemic. In terms of money, really, I mean, it's quite a big it's an amount, but I'm not feeling comfortable to disclose that here. But I mean, it's a funding that really will take them to, I mean, you understand, deploying the system, cleaning the data, but also supporting in capacity building. That's another budget because we hire technical experts within that field. So it's quite a considerable amount. But once again, what it will leave behind is really a small maintenance fee for each SACCO because it's a shared platform. It will be very efficient and less costly to each SACCO to contribute and sustain the platform through the association, which is AMIA.
Right. What does it spell for efficiency? This is going to be cutting down on time and resources used to report to the National Bank of Rwanda, or BNR as we call it here. What will the impact be there?
As you understand, when you are using a manual system as a SACCO, you are not able to report effectively and efficiently to different stakeholders. So it can be reporting to your governance bodies, reporting to your members during annual general assembly meetings, and reporting to the regulator or any policy maker that would require any data from different SACCOs and the MFIs. So through this system, then it will be easier for them to really generate reports and be able to report, because any financial institution that is licensed by the central bank and regulated, they need to provide returns to the regulator every month so that really the public is protected. I mean, looking at their performance, looking at their soundness in terms of financial management, that requires really regular reporting. So it was quite hard for them to report using a manual system or some other system that would be not or weren't probably optimal. And that's really what is being addressed by AMIL through this.
That was Access to Finance Rwanda Acting Country Director Jean Bosco Iyachu on Rwandan SACCOs going digital. That's all we have for today's show, though. My name is Makeda Mahadio. Of course, as always, you can feel free to tag us on Twitter at CNBC Africa, and you can use the hashtag CBEA410. You've been watching Closing Bell East Africa, and we'll see you the next time.
Keep your business connected, secure, and productive from anywhere with our Return to Workplace digital solutions. Whether face-to-face or screen-to-screen interactions, ensure the health and safety of your staff with our various IoT solutions that include thermal scanning and people and spaces monitoring. Whether in the workplace, at home, or in the field, secure and protect your business information with our various cloud security solutions that include remote access and email security. To find out more, search vodacombusiness.co.za. Vodacom Business. Ready?
Anybody can, buy from any country. Let's say Uganda, for instance. Before, with the digital or the mobile payments that we had, that would only mean that our clients in Kenya, for instance, could access it. But once I have a transaction service that allows my customer, no matter where they are in the world, to access my product, then that makes our growth faster. It makes our footprint growth a lot faster. We're currently in conversation with freighting companies, and especially because now that we have Visa, I'm able to then sell my product to anybody in London or in whatever part of the world, because our platform now allows us to sell to anybody. So once those conversations with the freighting companies are done, then it's an automatic, we can be that global company that we've always wanted to be.
10 years of her foundation, Graça Machel only on the next CNBC Conversation.
Good afternoon and welcome to Closing Bell South Africa, your wrap of the markets day. Our markets just closing and a relatively weak performance today. We'll get into those main drivers in just a moment. We'll also ask whether it's time for you to buy property. It is by far the worst performing sector on the JSE, meaning, however, that the sector does offer some cheap discounts. We'll get the views of Stanlib's head of property. We'll also get the view on the motor industry with the head of Barloworld, Retail Moto there, who'll drive us through its outlook for the industry amid continued pressure from COVID-19. And let us know what you think. The hashtag to use is CBSA410 and you can tweet us at CNBC Africa. Let me know what you're thinking. Reach me at Fifi Peters. Before we get to, actually, it is time for us to look at your top stories. Here were the main stories that did make headlines. We begin, of course, with the reports around, the reports from President Cyril Ramaphosa's Economic Advisory Council. The Presidential Economic Advisory Council says that plans to curb rising debt are too ambitious, suggesting a more gradual but credible debt reduction target. The panel, appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa, says that cuts in public spending would hamper growth and would give rise to other unwanted consequences. The recommendation comes as eyeballs focus on Ramaphosa's economic recovery plan due on Thursday. This is also ahead of the Finance Minister Tito Mbowene's midterm budget speech later this month. Mining production slowed by 3.3% year-on-year in August. The largest negative contributors were gold, iron ore and coal, dropping 36.9% collectively. The largest positive contributor was platinum group metals, increasing by 12.7%, with increased economic activity from softer lockdown restrictions. Seasonally adjusted mining production climbed 6.8% in August compared to July. Results from the property sector. Equitas Property Fund reported relatively flat distribution per share growth at 74.4 cents a share compared with 74.43 in the previous comparable period. On the growth side, the group does expect that its e-commerce strategy will drive demand in the United Kingdom, which saw a sales surge of 26% in the first half of 2020. However, its South Africa e-commerce space has not experienced the same highs. All right, as I said, we will talk property a little later on in the show, but for now, let's focus on your markets and what did move the stock exchange. Dale Hutchinson, who's the fund manager at Absa Asset Management, joins us for that conversation. Dale, good afternoon. It seems the JSE are lower following its counterparts over there in Wall Street, and it looks like markets there are quite perturbed by the fact that Johnson & Johnson has had to pause its trial at the late stages due to a candidate becoming ill. Not too uncommon for trials of this nature, but would you say that this was the main driver that did drag us lower, or were there other factors at play?
I suspect that is one of the factors, and I think we're just likely to see some volatility. I think there was excitement yesterday around, a possible deal being done in the US around stimulus. And sometimes maybe sanity prevails and a bit of that enthusiasm comes out. So today we're seeing markets pull back. I suspect it's a bit of that as well.
It looks like the excitement around the stimulus is what is helping support the rand. It's only marginally weaker for the day. But nonetheless, Adele, I'm seeing a lot of talk about how markets are pricing in at this stage. The fact that Biden is going to win. There's this talk of this blue wave and stimulus that will come as a result of the Democrats obviously wanting to table a larger stimulus or fiscal stimulus package over in that country. Are you taking the same view? Is this perhaps driving the view that you're taking on stock markets?
I mean, in terms of trying to call U.S. elections, I think we all learned our lesson from the last U.S. election, where all the polls got it wrong. So I think you've got to be a little bit cautious. I think it's a bit balanced in that, a Democrat win certainly and a clean sweep will mean, some rollback potentially of some of the tax breaks that were received by the market very favorably, and that will be a negative. But as you pointed out, certainly the Democrats are advocating for a much larger stimulus package, which in some respects could help with growth. And in that way, that could be a positive. Net, I think short term, a Democrat win probably does weigh a bit on markets, and hence I think markets are off their highs, and markets are a bit nervous. I think what will be probably helpful if we get a more certain win, so a win with a fairly large margin, so we don't end up in some sort of limbo period where the election gets contested. I think that will probably be quite negative.
Staying in the US for just a little while longer, the banks have officially kicked off the third quarter earnings season there. And I see that JP Morgan's third quarter numbers have come in a little bit, or in fact, quite a lot more better than expected. And I'm just wondering whether you think that this could perhaps set the tone for the kind of numbers that we could see coming from that sector, which is also one of the worst performers on Wall Street for the third quarter.
Well, I mean, I haven't actually looked at the detail of any of those numbers particularly, but I suspect some of it's probably coming from, trading and that sort of activity. And given the sort of outperformance that we saw in markets, perhaps, there is some support for the bank's earnings just from a trading point of view. And yes, I think that'll be positive. Certainly, if I look at the SA banks, they do look very cheap and attractive on valuation. This is an area where I would be investing, but not with necessarily the expectation that, in a year, it's all going to turn around dramatically in a year's time. I think there's still lots of risk around, in particular in South Africa with respect to bad debts. But yes, I think we saw with Standard Bank, there is profits to be made in trading in a market that has been this favorable.
Talking about stimulus and recovery and growth, of course, we are eyeing our own stimulus recovery plan later on this week. Your expectations, what kind of tones and notes does the market want the president to strike and to hit when he does deliver that speech on Thursday?
Well, I suspect it's going to be like a lot of government policy type documents. There's going to be some pluses and minuses. You can probably choose where you wish to focus your attention. I think hopefully we'll see some more emphasis on some of the structural headwinds that the economy faces, things like labor reform, certainly tackling the SOEs, and definitely hopefully again continued emphasis on addressing corruption. I think those sorts of things will help improve confidence and business confidence, and hopefully, stemming from that, in this particularly low interest rate environment, you can start to trigger private investment, which will hopefully create some economic growth. Because that really is what this economy needs to solve most of its problems. Policies around, basic income grants, etc., aren't what's going to actually drive this economy. They are actually something we probably can't afford, and we need to focus on policies that grow employment and grow employment dramatically.
And then, of course, what do you make of reports coming out of the Economic Advisory Council that says that our debt targets are a bit too ambitious, and that perhaps we should let the target, go over the expected 87% of GDP that the finance minister has projected, and perhaps go as far as 100%, right, without cutting back spending in key areas like health and education that will need immediate attention in the aftermath of COVID-19. I'm just interested, if we do let our debt spiral beyond set levels right now, what are the ramifications for potentially the bond market, where investors are already charging South Africa quite a lot, so quite a premium to invest in its local market as a result of concerns of the spiraling debt levels?
Well, I mean, I think we do unfortunately sit in a category of emerging markets where the world is perhaps not as forgiving when it comes to a country's debt levels as we can certainly see in places like the US and Japan, etc., where I think those economies get given a lot more leeway with respect to the sort of debt levels they can afford to run. So I think we've got to unfortunately run this balancing act of trying to create some fiscal counter-cyclical fiscal stimulus in an economy that's obviously taking significant strain, particularly on the back of COVID, but compounded by its own fiscal issues and governance issues, etc. So yes, I'd like to think that government does create counter-cyclical fiscal spend, which helps drive growth and create economic capacity for future growth. But in the same breath, we haven't necessarily got the luxury that people believe government spends their money efficiently, and that money will be spent in terms of growing the productive capacity and infrastructure of the economy. So I think we'll have to find some sort of balance. I think government, certainly under the finance department, has trying to be a bit more prudent, realizing the negative consequences if we do allow our fiscal budget to go out of the stratosphere, because I think the currency ultimately will be the lever that blows out, and then inflation comes in, and then the Reserve Bank will be left with having to hike interest rates, etc. So I think, hopefully we'll see a little bit, and we have obviously seen some stimulus spend around this. I think, to me, it needs to be spent just efficiently, and I think we can achieve quite a bit by just doing that.
All right. Dale, I think you and I will be a lot more clearer on the action that will be taken on Thursday once Ramaphosa does speak. But for now, thanks so much for your time. Have yourself a great evening. That was Dale Hutchinson, a fund manager at Absa Asset Management. Let's go to a short break. When we return, we talk property and whether the sector is investable in its current form. Stay with us.
When you think about industry convergence and to your point around disruption, all these small startups can really position themselves very well as big players by leveraging ecosystems to create macro systems.
Technology is becoming it's actually playing a bigger role if not eradicating poverty, but actually leveling the playing ground, and ultimately as a continent we're able to compete with the first world.
And then over and above that, it means it will enable us in Africa to leapfrog a lot of the legacy systems that other continents have had to, step through.
All of these things signify a gradual shift from, you need big bucks to build a big corporate, as opposed to start small with innovation that really finds resonance and solves for people's problems.
For the African continent, I think the opportunity lies in resolving problems that are really specific to the continent. There are opportunities to resolve real African specific problems, and that's where businesses can take advantage of.
Welcome back. Listed property in South Africa has experienced massive declines in 2020 as a result of COVID-19 and a weak economy. Once the darling performer for investors, the sector has struggled to regain losses seen in recent years. According to the latest report from Stanlib, vacancies in the retail and office markets are set to rise. Joining us to review the numbers is Keelan Ndlovu, the head of listed property funds at Stanlib. Keelan, good afternoon, and it is really great to catch up with you. There's quite a few jobs that I wouldn't want in my life, and I think that right now yours is one of them, having to, manage funds in a sector that whose returns have been dismal for investors, even before COVID, and then you throw COVID-19 into the cocktail and you get an even worse picture. I'm interested in your view about whether the worst is over for the sector and whether we should be jumping in right now, or could we see even steeper declines than we currently see at present?
Thanks, Fifi. It's been quite tough, and we believe that we've seen most of the worst news. As you highlighted, the sector is down about 50% year to date. 15% it was down at the beginning of the year, mainly due to a weaker economy, and then about 35% of the declines are due to COVID-19. So on average, if you look at the valuations, property is 50% down, and is trading 50% below the physical asset values, and it's been flattish over the last couple of weeks or so, and we believe that the sector is priced in most of the bad news, though it's still difficult to forecast earnings over the next year because of a couple of scenarios playing out.
So the thing is, even if we do get a recovery, COVID-19, some people are arguing, has changed the way that we will do things with working from home and the growth in the online retail space. For you, are you taking the view that the work from home phenomena is here with us to stay, and that we'll be left with a whole lot of office buildings that are vacant because most people are working from their studies at home? Or are you of the view that, come COVID-19, we find a vaccine, we all go back to the office and things resume back to normal? What view are you taking? Because I think that this will inform which stocks you currently have in your portfolio.
Sure, that's a good question. So if you look at the office market, it's the second biggest sector after the retail sector. So office market's about 25% of the property sector. And we believe that over time, you will see less and less demand for office space. And as leases expire, corporates are likely to take 10 to 20% less space over time. But that won't happen overnight. And the surveys that we're looking at, there's a strong preference to working from home, about 2 days at home, and then 3 days in the offices. So it's going to be more flexible type of working, and that will change the dynamics for the office market. So on average, we expect vacancies to continue to increase.
All right, and you also do forecast quite a dim view for the retail market, and I'm just curious about the online shopping space, where in South Africa the growth of online has been a lot slower than other parts of the world. In fact, earlier I was reading results, I think, from Equitas Property that was saying that its UK e-commerce space was growing by leaps and bounds compared to what was happening in South Africa. So do you expect this current momentum to stay the same, or will it pick up as a result of COVID-19? And then again, what does this mean for vacancies in our shopping malls, and how do property companies protect any form of margin that is left to protect?
Sure. So online shopping won't grow as fast as in other markets if you compare that to the UK or US, where they're much more advanced. In South Africa, looking at various numbers, we don't foresee online shopping getting to the 15-20% levels, probably picking up about 5 or 6% over time. And the majority of our population cannot shop online, and the size of South Africa as well, logistically, is what makes it difficult, as well as the cost and data usage and comfort around credit cards. And the mid to low LSM market still has to go actually to the shop to do shopping. So it won't be as big as the other markets, but we are aware of the dynamics in the high LSM markets, most around maybe supermarkets as compared to clothing and other issues as well. So we're not as concerned.
Keelan, as you did say at the top of this interview, the sector is trading, I think, at around 50% below its net asset value. So there are attractive discounts to be had here. But you can't buy everyone, I imagine. So what would you advise our investors to pick up right now at these discounts? And what would you say we need to stay away from?
So there's two kind of choices you have. You can go defensive, comfortable, with some of the stocks like storage, equities in the industrial space, and stocks like resilient, exposed to the lower income market in terms of shopping centers and still expanding offshore. And then on the other side, if you're looking for, let's say, bargains, stocks that have been oversold, they include stocks like Hyprop, like a tech, which are trading at 75 even to 80% below NAV. So it's probably more higher focus risk on those stocks, but we believe actually the market is actually overly sold them.
All right, Keelan, it was really good to catch up with you. Thanks for that advice, and thank you for a very detailed view on the sector. That was Keelan Ndlovu, who is the head of listed property funds at Stanlib. From property to the retail motor industry, October is Transport Month, and we are taking a look at the conditions that the industry is operating under. Lockdown measures have had a devastating effect on the value chain, with the impact on dealerships particularly significant. Joining me to unpack the future of the motor retail industry is Marcia Mayaba, who is the CEO of Motor Retail at Barloworld. Marcia, thanks so much for your time. Drive us through your outlook for the industry and the potential potholes that you could face along the way, given the already weak economy that has been weakened further by COVID-19.
Good afternoon, Fifi, and good afternoon to CNBC Africa viewers. Thank you very much for having me today. Yes, certainly in terms of our outlook, Fifi, we are looking at a drop of about 30% in new vehicle sales within South Africa. And that is the forecast that we have gone into post-COVID-19. And at the same time, we're looking at about an 80% drop within our workshops and parts businesses, which is the after-sales part of a dealership business. And that on its own just talks to the pandemic and the effect that it has had in terms of our motor industry. So we are forecasting 2020 at probably about 360 and 380,000 units. And that's off a backdrop of about 450 and 500,000 units previously. So that's a significant jump. In terms of what the landscape looks like, we had your previous interviewee now talking about online. We've seen a significant increase in terms of online and digital interaction. The last count from a Barloworld perspective has been at about 10% increase. And digital is definitely going to come our way. You know, COVID-19 has definitely accelerated quite a bit of our behavior and driven consumer behavior. And then digital is the way to go. So we really, really do foresee that it's going to remain flat between now and 2021. But we also have seen some positives in the last couple of months since we came back from lockdown.
Certainly, I mean, the latest vehicle sales pointing to a recovery, although still down on the overall year. Marcia, I know that the industry is calling for some stimulus and a tighter recovery plan from the president. And as we all eyeing what he has to say about recovery on Thursday, I'd like to pick your brains about what you guys are putting on the table in the forms of, reducing taxes on new cars specifically. Walk us through that detail and the kind of stimulus that could bolster the sector even further.
Certainly from a retail perspective, Fifi, we feel that cost of ownership is really, really important. And we need to really address that with our government in terms of lowering the taxes so that we can be able to sell more cars. You know, the motor industry in South Africa contributes about 6 to 7% towards the country's GDP. And we feel that we have a significant responsibility in terms of employment and the sustainability of the South African economy. The recovery plan, you know, with my new appointment as vice chairperson for the National Association of Automobile Dealer Association, we are engaging with government, and you have to take a stakeholder interaction approach to the recovery plan. We have got the automotive development plan. However, that needs to be reviewed and revised because nobody foresaw the pandemic coming our way. Therefore, we have to engage with the original equipment manufacturer, which is NAMSA. We have to engage with government, we have to engage as NADA, and we have to engage as the private sector to ensure that we protect the jobs and there is sustainability of the motor industry in South Africa. And the only way we can do that is to engage with government and see what we can do from a stimulus package. And once again, that low cost of ownership is extremely important for us to engage on.
All right. Marsha, congratulations for that appointment, by the way. But just staying on the tax cuts and where the potential revenue could come from to compensate the cuts. Correct me here if I'm wrong, but I see that the industry is saying that potentially what government could do is remove the carbon tax paid at the time of purchase or reduce the ad valorem tax. I'd like to pick your brain on removing the carbon tax, because now is that not negating efforts that are trying to fight climate change, which many are saying could be the next crisis that we are facing?
So we're saying as a motor industry, we absolutely feel that we have to protect the environment, Fifi. So carbon emissions and low carbon usage on vehicles is a given. However, we are saying to government that, you know, there's some local manufacturing that takes place in South Africa. Some of the OEMs have got plants in South Africa, and they've invested heavily in South Africa. Therefore, we're saying we're not running away from the fact. However, can we engage on possible reduction or just some relief period in terms of the CO2 emissions? So that is our view. But once again, we are not abdicating our responsibility in terms of what the environment needs and the sustainability of our environment.
Marsha, thanks so much for your time and for your view. We will have to leave it there. Marsha Mayaba, who is the CEO of Motor Retail at Barloworld, driving us through the industry outlook there. My director says that it is time for the team that is working at the office and that has been working at the office throughout the lockdowns is ready to get into their cars and drive home. Hip hip hooray. And for myself here from my living room, thanks so much for watching. As always, I'll see you again tomorrow. It's bye for now.
Concern is that African economies had been slowing even heading into this COVID crisis. And given the strains on fiscal revenue, given the fact that there hasn't been much room for significant fiscal stimulus packages, the key question is what is going to be driving growth going forward? It's going to be very difficult for African countries to go it on their own, to do this on their own. But we also know that we can never interpret or analyze the outlook for African economies in isolation to what is happening in the global economy. What we have seen recently is an unprecedented increase in the central bank balance sheets of developed markets. That liquidity is going to have to go somewhere. And the ability of African economies to attract some of that, to be able to sustain investment rates, even as governments have to pull back, that is going to be key to the growth outlook for the region.
Don, I'll send it back over to you.
All right, Sue, thank you. And we are just about 90 minutes from the scheduled start of Apple's high-speed event. Josh Lipton, this event is being called by some the most significant iPhone event in years, but I'm not so sure.
John, the super cycle begins. That's at least how Apple bulls are talking about the event here. The expectation is that 4 new iPhones are on the way, complete with 5G connectivity, which promises faster data speeds for tasks like streaming games and movies. Apple's latest and greatest A14 Bionic chip and longer battery life. There are trends potentially working in Apple's favor. Entering
You're watching Beyond Markets, where we bring you up to speed on development outcomes on the continent. I'm Kenneth Igbomo, and thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Coming up on today's show, well, COVID-19 is taking the back seat as we're seeing Nigerians troop to the seat to protest for police reforms. So we'll find out the best and worst case scenario with a security expert. You can join the conversation. Let us know what you think. The hashtag to use is Beyond Markets. You can also hit me up on my handle. That's at Kenneth Igbomo. But first, let's look at what is playing out here. Security expert Dr. Ona Ikomo, who is the national president of the Association of Industrial Security and Safety Operators of Nigeria, says Nigerians should brace up for an inevitable upsurge in violent crimes as a result of the disbandment of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad by the federal government of Nigeria. He joins me now to clear his position on this and weigh in on the recent NSAS protests playing out in Nigeria today. Thank you so much for your time on the show, sir. And then let's look at that best case and worst case scenario. So you're saying we're going to see that uptick in violent crimes?
Yes, most certainly, Mr. Ken. The situation is that the bad guys are watching the news, just like we are watching, or like you are making the news. And they are seeing what is going on. And once there's that lacuna, once there's that gap in service, they are going to capitalize on it. Now, it is even being said in some quarters that the reason the protest is persisting is that some bad guys have joined such that they can elongate it and give room for them to carry out their operations. That, I guess, is a conspiracy theory. But the concrete fact here is that anytime you have a reduction in policing services or in security enforcement, there is inversely a spike in crime. That occurs. So, I mean, that's a proven fact. So that's what my release was based on, that we're going to see an uptick. And because of this, I mean, that's a fact. We're going to see it. And I was really calling for the police agency, for the police management to hurry up and put whatever it needs to put in place such that they can control crime, which is their constitutional duty.
All right, that's the worst case scenario, but let's look at the best case scenario, because we're seeing that these agitations, for some Nigerians, they will say they're long overdue, because we've seen quite a lot when you look at the video evidence that we have. Just by simply going to YouTube or social media channels, you see quite a number of cases of police brutality or in different ways. But looking at the best situation that could come out of this, though, in your view, talking about this engagement that we're getting with government, people agitating for their rights to be upheld and holding the police to account, to be more accountable at this time. For you, looking at the best case scenario for Nigeria as a whole, how can we benefit from this the most?
We should benefit immensely from it. What has happened is that the police form has long been overdue for reform, and it wasn't reformed. It's been promised several times. What we see is just creation of new divisions, new structural arrangements, but not with regard to effectiveness or performance of the police agency. And so that is what has really been happening here. So the police has really been regressing in terms of effective performance in the Nigerian polity. Nigeria is the third most terrorized country in the world. It's because we have poor policing. I mean, there's no two ways about it. What the military is doing right now, policing 34 states in the country, is an indictment of the capabilities of the Nigeria Police Agency. So, I mean, let's not take our eyes on the ball. All the special committees have been created, civil defense, customs enforcement, this and that. They were all created, NDLEA, EFCC. They were all created because the Central Police Agency wasn't able to produce effectively. That is why we have all of those. So those are, to me, they are all indictments, because they are chipping away at the core of policing in Nigeria, and yet we don't have adequate policing. So having said that, I think the best thing that will come out of it is that there will be better reforms, there will be great reforms. And what I want the police agency to focus on is on technological, administrative, and programmatic means of achieving.
All right, still talking about police reforms in Nigeria. Looking at first, some will say sitting at the heart of all of this is the amount that we're spending, on policing in Nigeria. Just looking at the budget here, it looks like the government is going to spend about just about 450 billion next year on police in 2021. And looking at from where you sit as a security expert, looking at the amount that needs to go across the value chain in the police to get things going, do you think this amount is sufficient compared when you look at how things are playing out?
Absolutely not, sir. That's just a drop in the bucket. First of all, Nigeria is thoroughly under-policed. We should have a minimum of a million-man police agency, a million-man police force. We don't. We have less than 300,000. Now, even the 300,000 that is there, they are not trained, they are not equipped, they are not kitted. They don't have logistics. That's how come the state government always buy vehicles for the police agency, so on and so forth. So there are so many lacks everywhere as regard policing in Nigeria. And so I think budgeting 450 million is an existential fact, because the government realizes that it can ignore the police agency and nothing will come out of it. Well, perhaps that is another good that will come out of this protest. Because with these persistent protests, the government will now realize.
All right, well, interesting times we're looking at here, but let's address these agitations that is on the ground now. When you look at how things are playing, we're seeing young people, going to the streets, agitating for better policing, for the police to be held accountable at this time. It speaks largely to a trust deficit that is between that social contract between the police and the citizens of the country. And there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done in that regard. First, yes, you mentioned the fact that we're under police, talking about only 300,000 people, and it speaks to why the government needs to even listen more to people, because in the case of a serious uprising, they were largely under police to deal with the agitations. But looking at building that trust deficit and moving forward from here, I'd like to get your thoughts on how this step we can take this step.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ken. I think there's a lot that needs to be done here. We need to go back to the Pelian concept of policing. Sir Robert Peel, who created the Metropolitan Police Agency 1829. We need to go back to that concept and look at what were the key takeaways there. Number one, it says we must have crime statistics, that the effective policing is demonstrated by reduction in crime. Now it says, it talks about courtesy, it talks about performance, it talks about dressing and every policeman being identifiable, and so on and so forth. There were many things in that Pelian police reform. However, the key here, which is where, of course, the Nigeria Police Agency came from. Now, the key here is that we need to go back in there and put in key things into the police agency: accountability, responsibility, effectiveness, efficiency. These are concepts that are alien right now to our police agency, and they must go back in there, because that is the core of effective or responsible policing, or even, if you may, national policing. Because when we have that, and how can you achieve this? Through training and retraining and proper management and supervision, effective supervision. So these are the kinds of things that need to happen now for our police agency to, regain the trust of citizens and, bridge this trust gap that exists right now, which is creating difficulties.
All right, but when you look at the NSAS protests, if you just take a look back at the dailies over the past 5 years, you see that almost every year it keeps recurring. So it means that at some point the government, they say either they are ending SARS or they are redeploying, or they are different adjectives have been used over time to explain what the government has been trying to do with this controversial unit here. But let's look at how we can get it to the next level, though, and the new unit that we're going to see. How best can the citizens be involved in, especially addressing matters of civil infractions by officers of the police?
Civil rights. Well, I think. What needs to happen here is that you ought to have some kind of a civilian review board, because the oversight mechanisms are in existence. Let's just put it that way right now. there are no civilian oversights right now. Now you have what do you call it? The one that we have CPRC, Police Community Relations Committee, but that's not just materials for police within their beating zone. But there is no real oversight agencies out there. They have the Police Service Commission, but that's a government agency that is dealing with promotions of police personnel. So who is reviewing police performance and even police integrity issues, if I may ask? So that's really where the problem is. So we don't have any structures in place right now to review police performance or police attitudes, even how they are carrying out their jobs out there. Now, I know Nigerian civil society organizations, some like YAGA, when we have elections, they go out there and a clean foundation, for example, even my own organization, ISEN, we go out and we review police performance in given circumstances. However, you must have an institutional mechanism for oversight or for overseeing police functions and police attitudes, because these are attitudes. These are when people start behaving. It takes a long time for it to get to where SARS is today in Nigeria. People, they start being rude, then they start pointing their guns at people. They start, doing all kinds of stupid things. Then they start shooting people. Now that's where we are now. At that level, we are at the highest point of the violence continuum. And that is where we are coming in. So what we are saying is, when they are being rude, when they are even dressing badly, that's already a sign, like I told you from Pilihan policing, Metropolitan Policing. When you dress badly, it already tells me you don't care, that you don't respect the members of the public that you serve. And so you're already saying something. From there, they now get to rudeness and start doing illegal detention, abusing rights and what have you. So there's a continuum there, and it takes time. So we need to get in tune, and we need to get the government to organize civilian oversight, some kind of civilian oversight in conjunction with police management that will look at what the police is doing. And then when there's a case of extrajudicial killing, it must receive the highest attention, or even illegal, deprivation of liberty. It must receive serious attention, because that's where it starts. When they start doing those things, nothing happens, then of course they go overboard.
All right, then talking about that violence continuum, we'll continue the conversation after this break. Interesting viewpoints expressed there by Onai Komo, is the national president of the Association of Industrial Security and Safety Operators of Nigeria. Beyond Market continues after the break.
Construction and the operation of the Gautrain system has created a lot of jobs. It's enhanced the economy and also helped to establish the rail sector here in Gauteng. The obvious next step is to assess the benefits that extensions to the rapid rail system could bring to the province.
All this started back in 2014 when the province decided to do a 25-year integrated transport master plan. And it wanted to look ahead and say, 2037, 2038, around there, how would people be moving in the province? And the single conclusion that we came to is that moving people to and from jobs in perpetuity on the roads is just not going to work. And what we've come up with is a 5-phase plan. It covers an additional 150 kilometers of rail line that would then complement and join up with the southeastern quadrant at Jabulani in Soweto, linked through Roodepoort, coming through Randburg, Cosmo City, and to Sandton, really connecting the economic hub as we have it now. And then moving northwards up into the Tshwane area, heading through Irene, Tshwane East up to Mamelodi, then ultimately also in the east-west corridor, going out past Art Tambo, out into the Boksburg-Benoni area, and then finally heading out to Lanseria out on the West Rand. So it's a very ambitious long-term plan.
Welcome back to Beyond Markets. If you're just joining us, my guest is Ona Ikomo, the National President of the Association of Industrial Security and Safety Operators of Nigeria. And we've been exploring the best and worst case scenarios, looking at the EndSARS agitations happening across Nigeria at this time. Before we left off, Ona was just talking about the violence continuum where we are at now, when we've seen peaceful protesters being shot at by police officers. And it speaks largely to the need for training of the police to, on civil engagement. And Ona, I'd like you to speak to this point, talking about the amount of training we need for the police officers to deal with different ways in which they can engage with the civilians.
Thank you very much, Ken. I think what we need to do is we have to have perhaps a re-evaluation of the police training curriculum, because the kind of bad behavior we have seen from police personnel out on the streets, not just SARS, even regular police, they do the same kind of things. The kind of behavior we have seen out there shows that there's a gap, there's a training gap, or even perhaps some kind of deficiency in the curriculum, the existing curriculum. So I think we need to probably address that in terms of tactics, police methods. We need to look at human relations, the interpersonal relations. Like SARS people exhibited a lot of lose-lose mentality, which is negative strokes, and from personal relations. Now, what did that mean? That means I'll kill you, and the worst that will happen is I get killed. And so when somebody say that they are sick, they are mentally sick, and so that goes to another point there: psychological assessments. An assessment is before the fact, and then psychological evaluation. Evaluation is after the fact. Like right now, these SARS guys, we should be carrying out psychological evaluation of many of them, because many of them are really sick. Some are said to have PTSD. When you are fighting the kind of violent robbers we have in Nigeria, man, you can't be a sane guy after all those exchanges. So there must be a mechanism in place for treating them. They are not bad people. They are not wicked people. It's just that they are sick. And that's really what it is. And we are not treating their sickness. So we shouldn't expect them to behave any differently. That's if they do come out there and visit their violence on us. So I think that psychological evaluation, but then musketry, that is weapons handling and target practice, those should be emphasized, because what happens is we often have cases of people who are struck by stray bullets because the people are not able to shoot straight. Now, aside from musketry, combat practice, policemen need to be taken into settings where they are trained in combat. That's actual combat practice. They are given scenarios which they react, and to see, it's called SNS, shoot, no shoot. Are you going to shoot that? Because they will show somebody and the person doesn't have a weapon. Do you shoot if the person doesn't have a weapon, even if you are scared yourself? Well, you shouldn't shoot. That's really what it is. And or you see a lady carrying a baby, and the lady is not armed. Do you shoot? No. But what we have right now is, out of fright and out of not being conditioned, we call it battle inoculation. Not out of not getting battle inoculation, they just shoot at anything and say, oh my shit, I'm sorry, I didn't know. So that's not proper policing. We have to have policing that is trained and retrained again and again, and ready to do the right thing in the field. Yeah, because you are going to be confronted with situations which are going to test.
Yeah, interesting viewpoint you put forward that and as to how the officers need to be trained, especially that psychoanalysis that is definitely needed for them to be able to handle weapons, especially in the face of protesting civilians who are unarmed. But it speaks to largely because when you look at this, it's quite an unprecedented arrangement we're seeing here with these agitations, and it's actually putting us in a new place because usually when you hear of protests in Nigeria, it usually has a political coloring to it, or it has some civil group who are agitating for something. Usually a face of somebody to interface with is there. But this is young people from different walks of life in Nigeria who at different times have either a family member or a friend or somebody who they know of who have been either been brutalized by the police or whatever, and they are coming out now to state their claim. So in dealing or in engaging with people like this at this time, that level of intelligence that is highly needed from the security operatives to deal with this. And from your point of view as a security expert, I would like to get to know from you how best we can see the authorities engage to kind of quell these protests at a time like this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ken. I think what we are seeing is really novel. This goes back to like the 70s when the students in Nigerian universities used to protest and say Ali must go and all that. That's what I see replaying now in our society today, where there's not just one leader, or maybe like if you take the BBOG thing, you had just the leaders, you could just call them and say, don't do, and it will be over. But this one is diffused and is enabled by social media, because they are able to organize even without the police knowing what is happening, and they spring up everywhere. This morning, I was on my way to work, and I found out that the Lekki toll gate has been blocked. So I took a by road, and going through the by road, rowdy motorists have blocked the by road. Then the next thing, I get a call from my office saying that the whole of Balende has been taken over by protesters. So they say if I'm still close home, I should just turn back. And that's what I did. I turned back and came back home. So what I'm saying by that is this protest this time is diffused. It's in so many different places at once. And in fact, as I was coming back home, the toll gate by Leganza here on Lekki-Ekpe Road was also getting blocked. It hadn't been totally blocked yet, getting blocked. So I was lucky to escape and get through and get back home. So having said that, I think the police agency needs to understand also what is happening. Because what we have is many flashpoints all are the same. And the purpose of that is to overwhelm the capability of the police to bring down, gain maximum efficiency in their protests, which is okay, because Nigerians need to speak out. Now, one of the problems we have, and which is why this protest is so large, is that there is a lot of pent-up anger. There's a lot of pent-up emotions. People have not been given room to vent their frustrations. So this is not just about NSAS. It could well be about the entire police agency, because there's a lot of frustration and anger against the police. Then it could also equally be about the government, because there's a lot of hardship in the land today, and there's a lot of conception of things not going well for Nigerians. So having said that, I think we need to put all of that in context. But in terms of the question you asked, how should the police handle it? Well, I think we know from crowd management that every crowd has a leader, one way or the other. Whether the leader is not necessarily somebody who was chosen by some election, they just pop up. So the police needs a lot of intelligence assets now to monitor, that is go online and find out where they're going to mobilize, and then put a lot of plainclothes guys out there so that they can steer the course of the protests, and then can talk down violence. Because I don't have any problem with protesting, but I have problem with violence. I have problem like right now blocking the road, not letting anyone through. You can protest quietly on the side of the street. We will see you, we will hear you, we will acknowledge you. But you don't need to block the road, because I have legitimate business to do today, but I can't do it. And many other millions of Lagosians too are in the same boat. So I think that kind of a situation should be put in check by using plainclothes assets, using intelligence assets that can now go there and probably help direct. Of course, you also need uniformed policemen to come in there to prevent breakdown of law and order. And that's what needs to happen at this point in time. And then certainly the political elite must keep talking down this thing until...
I ask about this intelligent engagement strategy. About this intelligent engagement strategy because when you look at the wider security facing Nigeria, yes, security challenges is not new to Nigeria. We've had quite a number running for years now, from Boko Haram to bandits we're seeing, or more recently. And I understand that you have a book and you talk about how Nigeria can engage at this front. I'd like you to speak more on that.
Thank you very much, Ken. Well, I just published a book, and it is captioned Boko Haram, Security Considerations and the Rise of an Insurgency. And what it does is it looks at the history of the Boko Haram problem, because one of the biggest problems we have is that many people in authority, many people in power, they don't understand the problem. So they are treating the symptoms and the underlying cause and the underlying problem is still there. So the problem remains because they are trying to put out the flames, but the fire is burning, as it were. And that is why this crisis has persisted for 11 years now. And there is a lot of denial. There's a lot of perhaps not telling the entire truth, as it were, because most of the Northeast, particularly Borno State, is only in enclaves like Maiduguri and perhaps Bama that you have control of the forces. Most of the outlying area is under insurgent control. They set up checkpoints, they pick victims that they like, kidnap them, kill them, whatever. They charge taxes and so on and so forth. So that is why, like the attack you saw recently on the governor of Borno State, Mr. Zulum, whose backup convoy was attacked and over 30 persons killed and vehicles scattered away, including even military assets, that's security assets like security vehicles, APC specifically. So APC, that is armored personnel carrier. So having said that, I think this conflict we have in the northeast of Nigeria is not well understood. And the big problem is metastasizing. It is going abroad. It's going beyond the Northeast. And as is common for our authorities, we are not paying attention. We are not following the facts. We are not following the intelligence. And very soon we will have issues like this where we are reacting after the genie has jumped out of the bottle. And it's really unfortunate. So we need to, I wrote the book and gave a lot of
creative. Understand how this conflict and situation such that quite a lot of work needs to be done. But thank you so much for your time, and definitely we would love to engage more to understand how best we can tackle the rising insurgency challenges that we're seeing in Nigeria, as well as this new protests that are coming up with the EndSARS movement in Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate your comments on this show. I've been speaking to Onai Komo. He's the national president of the Association of Industrial Security and Safety Operators of Nigeria. I'm afraid that's all the time that we have on Beyond Markets for today. For me and the team, enjoy the rest of your day.
Concern is that African economies had been slowing even heading into this COVID crisis. And given the strains on fiscal revenue, given the fact that there hasn't been much room for significant fiscal stimulus packages, the key question is, what is going to be driving growth going forward? It's going to be very difficult for African countries to go it on their own, to do this on their own. But we also know that we can never interpret or analyze the outlook for African economies in isolation to what is happening in the global economy. What we have seen recently is an unprecedented increase in the central bank balance sheets of developed markets. That liquidity is going to have to go somewhere. And the ability of African economies to attract some of that to be able to sustain investment rates, even as governments have to pull back, that is going to be key to the growth outlook for the region.